I live in New Zealand, and in late 2018, I was feeling kind of lonely. So I decided to download the dating app Tinder to try and find myself a nice guy to go on a few dates with. Maybe even find myself a long-term boyfriend out of it. I ended up matching with this guy who'd come over from Australia, and we chatted for 2 weeks before we finally met up. The conversation was quite light, nothing too heavy. It was fun. Like I said, he was from Australia, so we talked about Aussie things, and I remember telling him how much I wanted to visit Melbourne. He said he'd been there once or twice, and started making recommendations for some great coffee shops he knew of. He seemed like a nice normal guy, so we agreed to meet. Then maybe 5 days or so before we were due to meet, he got really persistent and impatient. He would text me multiple times in a day, and if I didn't reply straight away, he would ask if something was wrong. I thought it was weird that he was being so clingy after starting off so confident. He kept trying to bring the date forward so we could meet up sooner, and would totally forget if I had told him I was busy on a particular day. Almost like he wasn't paying attention, or didn't care about what I had to say. It was honestly really unusual for someone to be that persistent with me. I have had guys before who are maybe a bit persistent, but only out of nervous excitement. A different kind of excited than this Aussie guy seemed to be. I just couldn't understand why it was that he could not possibly wait until the Sunday we'd arranged to meet. It felt very narcissistic, and I should have seen it as the red flag that it was and just not met up with him at all. I had the messages saved on my phone for a while, so I have a record of the exact dates and times he sent some of his messages. So on the 2nd of December, he messaged me just after 9 AM saying, "Good morning, how are you?" And again, about an hour and a half later. I didn't reply to the first message because I was asleep, and I think he took it the wrong way because he said it was fine if I'd changed my mind and didn't feel like going on the date. That was when I messaged him back and confirmed that I would meet him later on that day. We met up and went to a place called Revelry. It's a very standard bar, really popular, and lots of people go there. But it's definitely more of a nighttime bar. I had never drunk there during the afternoon or the daytime, but it was open. Seemed like it had a chilled atmosphere, and he wanted to go there, so that's where we went. He was a bit bigger than the pictures on his Tinder profile showed, and it was obvious that he had put on a little bit of weight. He had big distinctive eyes, and he was very, very clean cut. I mean, like his clothes looked freshly washed and ironed. He was also very well groomed, obviously took good care of his skin, and was very good looking. I remember asking him a lot of different questions, and he just sort of talked at me. He tried to ask me a few questions, but they weren't very in-depth ones. I thought he was a bit nervous, to be honest, but that's not unusual for a first date. Then things started to unravel, because he had said one thing when messaging me about where he had worked, and a different thing on the date. I started to feel a bit uneasy. I wanted to trust him, but as soon as he started to be inconsistent, I began to wonder if he was just lying about stuff to impress me. Because he was from Australia, I asked him where he had met his Kiwi friends, and he told me that all of his friends were police officers or somehow involved in law enforcement. He said he had met them while out drinking in various bars, how they'd gotten to know each other over time, and they regularly invited him back to their places for barbecues. He also mentioned that his best friend from Australia was coming over to be a Crown Court prosecutor. That's when I noticed that a lot of the stuff he was talking about kind of had this running theme to it. It seemed like he was obsessed with that sort of thing, which in hindsight explains an awful lot. I think he was trying to process some of the things that he'd been up to over the previous few days, and it came out in his conversation style. He obviously thought an awful lot about policemen, dead bodies, ways people can be killed, prosecution, justice, and the court system, and it just came out in a very strange way like that on our first date. Like I said before, we talked a lot about him being friends with many policemen, and he went into a lot of depth regarding the details of certain investigations that they'd apparently shared with him. He said they were having a really rough time because of bodies going missing in the Waitakere Ranges. He told me that police corpse sniffing dogs can only detect decaying flesh about 4 feet deep under the soil, so if the bodies are buried any deeper than that, the police won't be able to find them. I thought it was a bit of a morbid thing to talk about on a first date, but it was an interesting fact nonetheless. We also got into a conversation about all the different kinds of poisonous snakes in Australia, and he became quite animated about that. He obviously had a passion for the natural world. It was quite out there, but I thought it was cute. I love animals too, so I was glad we had something in common, and it made me feel a bit more relaxed again. But then, right as I started to feel comfortable about him again, he started telling me this really bizarre and creepy story. He told me how crazy it is that a guy can make one little mistake and then go to jail for the rest of his life for it. He went on to tell me about this guy he knew back in Oz, who had consensual rough sex involving choking with his girlfriend, and had ended up accidentally killing her in the process. He assured me that the whole thing was a horrible, tragic accident. How things just went wrong suddenly, and how the guy was really upset because he loved her and would never hurt her on purpose. Yet still, the guy was done for manslaughter and was sent to prison for a long, long time. What I now know is this could have been him testing out his story on me. When he was able to see that I was a bit uncomfortable with what he was saying, he tried to change the subject so we could talk about more mundane things. I didn't try to make a swift exit or anything. I'm quite used to dealing with all sorts of people, and I'm not saying people who talk about dark things on a first date are bad people or anything, but it was definitely weird. We hung out for a while, but after about 3 hours or so, I made some excuse as to why I had to leave, and we said goodbye. As we were parting ways, he said, "My car is this way," and pointed off down a particular road. My car was down that same road, but by that stage, I was feeling uneasy, and my instincts had just kicked in, telling me to walk a different way. He was also a lot bigger than me, so if something went wrong, I knew I wouldn't be able to defend myself. In hindsight, it was a good decision. It was my intuition. My brain was saying, this was strange, that was strange. Looking back on it now, it is really weird to think who he actually was. I don't think it is in the realm of what normal human brains can comprehend. But just the day before we met up, the guy I was out on that first date with had murdered a girl in his hotel room. A British girl called Grace Mullane. The reason he brought up his friend accidentally strangling his girlfriend is because that's exactly how he'd killed her. Although whether or not it was on purpose is another question entirely. The reason he'd mentioned the Waitakere mountain range is because that's where he disposed of her body. And all of the other bizarre facts he'd mentioned about sniffer dogs, for example, was research he'd been doing the previous night that was still consuming his mind. It is hard to look back and think about what had just happened to her. From what I understand, whilst we were on our date, her body was still in his hotel room, hidden under the bed or something, wrapped in a blanket. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. So a few years ago, I matched with a girl on Tinder who I ended up having some serious chemistry with. We went for coffee. Coffee ended up being drinks. Drinks ended up with sparks flying. And then boom. We're in the middle of this whirlwind romance. We're texting all the time, whenever we're not just spending days at each other's apartments, fantasizing about taking vacations together. All the stuff two young people do when they've got that new relationship energy going. But then one day, right when I thought things couldn't get any more perfect, she sat me down with the obvious intention of having a pretty serious talk. I figured she wanted to break up with me, so I braced myself for the worst. Only it's not quite as bad as I feared. It was just, well, weird. She tells me she's poly. At the time, I had no idea what that meant, so I just sort of stared back at her with this confused look on my face, prompting her to explain that poly is short for polyamorous. For those that don't know the term, it's basically a fancy word for when someone practices open relationships. The girl says she can commit to me, but that she'd have to be free to see other people, albeit in a less serious capacity. Being young, dumb, and totally besotted with her, I agreed to it, and it ended up being the worst decision I have ever made. I started off by telling her she could do what she wanted, but only as long as she didn't tell me about any of it. She agrees to this, but as the weeks went by, I did start to get a little jealous. She sought to remedy this by introducing me to the apps she'd use to find other polyamorous types to hook up with. An app called Discord. Now apparently, its primary use is for video games, but I learned that people use Discord for all sorts of things, including hookups. The girl tells me I'm welcome to join the server she was a part of, and look for someone who was open to something casual. Fair's fair, I thought, so I did. I made an account and got her to invite me to the little server that was innocuously called The Farm, despite having absolutely nothing to do with anything remotely agricultural. So upon joining, the girl introduces me as her partner, and gets a few of the members to walk me through all the various channels and such. They were actually pretty nice, talking me through some of the elements of polyamory, and waxing lyrical about how nice the girl I was seeing was, which, I don't know, kind of warmed me up to the whole idea. I get talking to another girl on there. We vibe a little, but I can't see anything happening with her. I basically just did it to make the girl I was seeing happy, which apparently it really did. I had gained myself a lot of brownie points from it. So all's well that ends well, right? Nope. About a week into being on the Discord server, I get a message from someone I at first assumed was a girl. We exchanged greetings, made a little small talk, then I received a picture message. It turns out this was not a girl at all. It was a dude, and the picture was the one thing I really did not want to see. What exactly it was, I'll leave up to your imagination. But just imagine the worst possible thing a perverted dude could send you over the internet. And yeah, you got it. He follows the picture up by saying he wanted to hook up with me and my girl at the same time. I just ignore the messages, assuming the dude is going to get kicked from the server for rule breaking or something, and eventually bring it up with my girl. She, on the other hand, vouches for this guy, and says she's been talking to him for a while, how he's normally perfectly nice and polite, and that I'm making a big deal out of nothing, claiming I'm just being jealous, etc. I tell her I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of a three-way hookup, how I want nothing to do with it, but again, that she's welcome to do whatever she wants, just as long as I don't have to hear about it. Drama smoothed over, and I think that's the end of it. Only it's not by a long shot. Cut to like a month later, things were still basically going strong with this girl, and I'm out doing some grocery shopping when I noticed something that caught my eye. It was one of those things that you just don't really pay attention to, but you know something is up. It's hard to describe. Pretty much every single person who walks into a grocery store either grabs a cart or a basket, right? And people just running in to grab one or two items are in and out in like a minute. So I remember seeing this one dude just kind of walking up and down the aisles with nothing in his hands and thinking, what is this guy doing here? But he wasn't doing anything too weird, so I just moved on. Only time and time again, I'm in an aisle, grabbing things off of shelves, and I see him idling. And a few times, we make eye contact. Nothing too creepy, just like a casual glance. But this happened over and over again, to the point where I was thinking, is this guy following me? Once I got my shopping done, I walked back to my apartment and forgot all about it. A few hours later, I'm sitting in my apartment alone, just chilling and recovering from a stuffed belly from the local Chinese place I got delivery from. I hear footsteps on the stairs outside my apartment. Heavy ones. Nothing unusual as such. But then the front door to my apartment just goes boom, shaking from some heavy impact on the other side. At first, I thought it was a neighbour or something, so I shouted out, "What the hell, dude?" But there's no reply, just another loud bang against the door. They're not trying to get my attention, they're trying to break in. I just about jumped out of my skin. Instinctively, I grabbed my phone to dial 911, whilst I ran into my bedroom, knelt down, and reached for the safe under my bed containing my .40 caliber. I told the dispatcher what's going on. She then says the cops are on their way, but I have no idea how much time I've got, so I ran back into the hallway with my pistol locked and loaded, aimed at the door, and shouted, "Cops are on the way, arsehole." But this does nothing to deter whoever's on the other side. They just kept slamming against the front door, and each time, it seemed like the door was closer and closer to just giving way. Only when I shouted, "I've got a 40 here, buddy, don't make me do it," does the banging stop. And this is perfectly timed with approaching sirens too. I then heard more heavy footsteps on the stairs outside, before all was quiet. A short time later, I'm giving a statement to the cops that arrived. I have my phone in my hand, and I see a notification come up from the girl that I'm seeing that just says, "I'm sorry." I wait until the cops leave to call her and ask, "Why are you sorry? Is this us breaking up?" And when she answers, she's in tears. Through her sobbing, she tells me something that makes my goddamn jaw drop. And here's basically a summation of what it was. She's been hooking up with the guy who'd sent me the unwanted picture, who had apparently gotten super weird once he was in her apartment, telling her she needed to break up with me because he wanted her as his main partner. He went off about how I wasn't down with polyamory, how I wasn't good for her, etc. And when he'd gotten aggressive about it, she kicked him out and told him not to contact her again. This guy is from a city on the other side of the state, and my girl figured he'd just drive back home, only he doesn't. And apparently, he'd gleaned enough information about me from her, maybe even gone through her phone to get a look at some of the pictures of me, to be able to actually track me down. That's when it hits me. It was him in the grocery store, who had then followed me back to my apartment, waited until it was dark, then tried to break in to do God knows what. Confront me, beat me up, kill me, God only knows. Now this polyamory stuff wasn't just making me jealous, it was putting me in actual goddamn danger. If that guy had only been a little more patient, waited for me to go outside to take trash out, anything like that, I legit might not be around to type this experience out. And that scared the living crap out of me, as I imagined it would any of you. Me and the girl broke up shortly afterwards. It was kind of sad, sure, but the whole experience had totally soured the relationship. Way beyond any kind of repair. We never talked again after that, but not before I'd told her to tell that creepy guy that we'd broken up, that I wanted nothing to do with any of that crap anymore, and to leave me the hell alone, or he'd be going back to his hometown in a wooden box. Now just hearing or reading the word Discord leaves a bad taste in my mouth, as I know the kind of creeps that are out there, using the internet for far worse than just some innocent kink stuff.